Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the TV Pilot's License Flight Number 11 with service to the J. Edgar Hoover Building, Washington, D.C. We ask that you please fasten your headphones at this time, secure your podcasting device, and remember, in case of a loss of power and a blinding light, you may lose track of time, possibly 9 minutes, but please refrain from asking your flight attendants what happened, as that information is classified and on a need-to-know basis.
Welcome to the TV Pilot's License. My name is Jeff Purvis, joined by Matt Singer and Rich Inman. How are you boys doing on this spooky Halloween edition of the TV Pilot's License?
I'm doing great. I would like to say that officially for this episode only, my name is Witch Inman.
Please refer to me from now on as Axe Singer.
Axe Slinger, Max.
Slinger. Damn it.
And I'm just Jeff.
Spooky Jeff.
Jeff with the G. It's the creepiest spelling of the name possible.
With a G.
Jeff.
How did we all become the announcer on SNL suddenly as our spooky voice?
Jeff Gerbis.
Ladies and gentlemen, Hoobastank.
Well, thanks so much for joining the podcast. If you did not get by the description, this week we're going to be talking about The X-Files, a classic from the 90s, starting in 1993. There was a revival. We'll talk about that as well. But for those who might be joining the podcast for the first time, Max, do you mind telling the folks what TV Pilot's License is all about?
You got it. So TV Pilot's License is a show where we review and break down the pilot episodes of some of the most famous and infamous shows in TV history. We figure out why these shows are successful, if they are, if they can be made today, if we're compelled to keep watching them. If it's your first flight, welcome aboard. We've got a whole library already wherever you find your podcasting needs. And we hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Yeah, I highly recommend the episode with everyone's favorite show, Father of the Bride. We all really left some glowing reviews about that one.
Well, talking about a scary show, Father of the Bride definitely fits in that category. Rich,
someone did get maimed.
That's true. Someone did in real life get maimed, as well as in the mental state I got maimed as well.
You know, real life is scarier than anything you see on TV when you think about it.
I say that every time I go to Vegas.
Oh my God. Well, Rich, I know when we come into these episodes and we come into the recording, you normally have an extra question. Maybe not something that's entirely related to what we watched, but something that's on your mind. Anything this week?
Yeah, I think this particular show lends itself to a kind of like an open-ended, like endless list of potential subjects. One of them, they describe the department in the FBI for the X-Files as defining the unexplained, which it could be friggin' anything. I mean, they did not limit this to UFOs, they did not limit it to aliens, they did not limit it to conspiracy theories, but I am very curious as to what your favorite conspiracy theory is, and explain it.
Oh, we're going to get some great new subscribers from this one.
Mine, I think, I was looking this up again because I think I texted like 10 people that I knew about it when I read it for the first time, and I'm so excited to share it, but you guys go first. Step up to the plate.
Max, up to you.
God, there's so many directions I could go, so many things I could say, but I am going to go with the fact that Prince Charles, or soon to be King Charles of England, is actually a vampire.
Do you care to give more? Or are you just going to shout your unfounded claim?
Please give more context.
I'm going to back this conspiracy up with 2 facts which are undisputable. 1, Charles and his family are in fact descendants of Vlad the Impaler. That is undisputed fact. If you go to Charles's family tree, he is a descendant of Vlad the Impaler. The second is that many members of his family have a history of a blood disease called porphyria, which is an iron deficiency which makes you very, very sensitive to sunlight. My third indisputable fact is, look at him. Look at him.
So you think the future king of England is the undead, basically?
Yes, I believe that he is an undead vampire.
Wow, the stakes are high for this.
All right. So what you two gentlemen do not know is I have actually been featured on another podcast talking about conspiracy theories.
I did not know this at all.
It's related to another line of work, but I have some favorites.
You may have heard of them. They just have to pay $1 billion of damages.
So there's a couple that I could talk about, sports ones all the time. A lot of them center around the NBA, sort of like there's a conspiracy that Paul Pierce pooped his pants, and that's why he was wheeled off of the court in that very, very famous...
I just like that for the alliteration.
Yeah. It's there's also...
Paul Pierce's poop pants.
The tip of the tongue, the teeth, the lips.
The NBA lottery is literally just like littered with conspiracy theories around it. But
the frozen envelope.
Frozen envelope. Kyrie Irving just magically going to Cleveland the same year that LeBron leaves. But I'm going to go with one that has to do with media in the vein of Frozen by Disney. If you
we
do
picked
not...
the same one. We picked the same conspiracy theory. Are you kidding me?
We're through the looking glass, people.
Oh, fuck off. All right, Jeff, you and I are going to tag team this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So why I find this one so funny is, for those who looked me up on LinkedIn, I work in search engine optimization. Literally, if you, prior to Frozen coming out, looked up the term Disney Frozen, you would see all of the stuff about Walt Disney's head being frozen in a cryogenic chamber. Now, magically, there's this amazing movie that literally we all know the song Let It Go. We all have our favorite Frozen character. Those are going to come up. You won't find any mention of Walt Disney for the first 100, 200 results. Folks at Disney have said this is not what the intent was of making this movie.
Why would they even ask people at Disney? They're gonna lie.
But, I like to think of what a beautiful, smart move by the marketing department at Disney to be like, there's no such thing as bad PR. Let's turn it into a movie.
Oh my God. Jeff and I picked the exact same conspiracy theory somehow, because I think this is the conspiracy theory that is the most plausible out of any of them. What other reason would they have needed to make an Ice Queen movie? Really? Because that exact story could have taken place in any dimension, in any part of the world, any superpower. But if you are literally looking up the anti-Semitic friend of the pod, founder of the Disney Corporation, Walt Disney, and his stupid severed head. That would be the number one thing that would come up. There's literally, I truly can't imagine another reason or so coincidentally like coming up with one of the biggest Disney titles of all time in an era where the search engine is at its most prominent. So I did have a backup for this, although I love that conspiracy theory so much. There's a conspiracy theory that there is in Chicago, this is a Chicago-centric one, that someone found a ton of mattress firm locations in the Chicagoland area that are all 0.5 or less than 0.5 miles from each other. And so because of the demand for mattresses and the sheer insane volume of these stores, they think it's a massive money laundering conspiracy, that no one's actually going to buy mattresses from these stores, and they're just laundering money for the mob. Which, if you take a look at the map of all these mattress firm locations, they're very, very close to each other. I can see this absolutely happening.
I've always heard that you hide a little bit of money underneath your mattress. I think the mob took it literally.
They put all of their money in 10,000 mattresses.
Guys, this is weird because we're recording the episode, but we're getting a caller. Should I let him in right now?
Oh my goodness, who could it be?
Yeah, who do you got?
Oh, it's me, you sons of bitches. Oh
my God, it's the CEO of ABC.
And if you know what's good for you, you're only going to talk about Rich's Chicago money laundering conspiracy. I swear I'll cut you. I'll cut you like a fish.
Well, I think if we want this podcast to be seen by anyone, we might need to move on to another subject. Rich, I do
want
to
worried about a frozen fish there?
Oh, yeah, possibly. I do want to thank you, Rich, for that amazing question. The interesting thing about conspiracy theories, though, and I've said this before, is that
he says it all the time.
Some of them might actually turn out to be true, right? Like, literally in the past year, the FBI released that they have, or excuse me, it was the National Security Agency Central Security Service released all the UFO documents that they had, and people had conspirized about UFOs forever. There's a lot of them that goes unexplained, but to quote a future episode of X-Files, the truth is out there. And I would like to transition. Rich,
this is actually a very prescient episode because this week Tom DeLonge announced his retirement from UFO hunting to rejoin the band Blink-182, and I'm glad that we are finally discussing something that's so in the forefront of news.
There's no career in a rock band. I don't know why he'd give up such a
you make no money
career.
touring, Tom.
No, you only make money touring now.
It is funny, though, they are starting off in Tijuana, Mexico, which has had UFO sightings, so maybe it's a dual-purpose trip.
They seem to have scheduled all their shows in Roswell, New Mexico. I can't explain that.
They're doing a 15-night residency in Marfa, Texas.
Let's talk a little bit about the X-Files and start off just with a synopsis, right? 2 FBI agents, Fox Mulder, the believer, and Dana Scully, the skeptic, investigate the strange and unexplained while hidden forces work to impede their effort. It's vague, yet it gives us so much. And Max, I would love to hear a little bit more about how this show came to be.
Absolutely, Jeff. So the X-Files pilot, titled Pilot, premiered on September 10th, 1993. So we're closing on 30 years of this show now. Super excited for next year. And This show is the brainchild of a gentleman by the name of Chris Carter. No, not the Hall of Fame wide receiver for the Minnesota Vikings. I'm sorry, it's never that one.
Oh, New man wasn't on the Minnesota Vikings.
So Chris Carter has a background like many great TV writers before him. He spent 13 years working for Surfing Magazine. Which is how he got his start
among us
in writing, eventually becoming the editor of this magazine. And he leaves to go write the screenplays for Disney TV movies.
Sorry, do you know how you get rid of Surfing Magazine?
How?
You shred it.
I'm so upset. I'm so upset with both of you.
So Chris Carter is basically the godfather of the DCOM. That's the Disney Channel original movie. But you could only write so many things like The Brat Patrol and Meet the Muncies before you wonder, what else is out there? What else could my talents be used for?
For you, perhaps.
So Carter has a chance meeting with one NBC president, Brandon Tartikoff, in their...
You guys. I'm back. I'm out of retirement. It's your boy Tarts.
When we said that we were going to hear this name again, we weren't kidding. So they meet in their mutual softball game, and Chris Carter ends up coming on board with NBC's development division to write a handful of pilots for them. He basically is helping them conceive new ideas. None of these shows get picked up, but some of these screenplays start floating around and getting interest around town. He ends up getting recruited by the Fox network, which at this point is only like 7 years into its existence, to start developing shows for them. Fox is this like hip, young network that's trying really hard to create shows that other networks wouldn't take chances on. They're aiming things at new audiences. At this point, they're really best known for like Beverly Hills 90210 and the Arsenio Hall show. So he takes this meeting with them. He starts developing this TV idea, and he said that his goal was basically just to scare people's pants off. That was his entire goal with this pilot. He starts taking inspiration from all sorts of TV from his childhood, old Twilight Zone episodes, a short-lived ABC series called Kolchak, the Night Stalker, which was basically about a newspaper reporter who hunts monsters. He also takes inspiration from Silence of the Lambs, ABC's Moonlighting, which was that Bruce Willis dramedy with like two bantering detectives, Twin Peaks, the Watergate scandal, and government conspiracies and UFO abductions. At this point, 10% of Americans believe they had some sort of contact with extraterrestrials. So you take all these elements together, and Carter presents this 18-page treatment of the X-Files to Fox, where it gets rejected. They're basically like, we have no idea what you're talking about, my guy. This seems like a cool idea, but we're not really sure where it's going. So he's able to get a second pitch.
Come on back to NBC, baby.
Wait, so you're telling me he didn't get it passed and he didn't have a tone poem? So tone poems are 1 for 1. Meanwhile, this 18-page treatment.
Yeah, writing full-fleshed treatments, kind of inconsistent. Tone poems, 100% accuracy rate. But he's able to get a second pitch at Fox, where they reluctantly decide to greenlight a pilot episode, which is weird because they give him $2 million to make this pilot, which is the equivalent of $4.2 million today. So for some real skepticism, they're throwing a lot of money at this guy.
Yeah, that's like Game of Thrones numbers. What are they doing over there?
That is this is money laundering. We're talking about how Fox is money laundering.
Wait, it's Mattress Firm. It's always been Mattress Firm.
Always.
So from the pilot, the show gets a series order for 13 episodes. That's going to get extended to 24. 24, a common number at Fox, as we'll learn. For the purposes also, this pilot was directed by a gentleman named Robert Mandel, who he's going to do a lot of TV in the future, but at this point he was coming off of the Brendan Fraser starring Dick Wolf written drama School Ties. Yeah, wow. Remember School Ties?
Any Jew who's listening to this podcast should know that movie. They watched it twice in Hebrew school, and if you have not watched that movie, I'm a big Brendan Fraser stan of the late 90s. It is such a good movie. Highly recommend.
I mean,
but we only talk about TV
we're
pilots
entering
here.
the Brendan Fraser Renaissance right now.
He plays a Jew in that movie, and Matt Damon talking about anti-Semites. We'll just leave that there.
You know how I know Brendan Fraser is a Jew? Because he has a complicated relationship with the mummy.
This same year, Brendan Fraser also played the caveman and Encino Man. So he played a caveman that year too. Wow, great year.
Proud of him. Proud of him. Brendan Fraser, friend of the pod. Come on.
Max, anything else about this show before we dive in?
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely talk more about this on the legacy side, but this show has 2 massive names in its writer's room. We'd be remiss just to not lead into the fact that both Howard Gordon and Vince Gilligan are staff writers and producers on this show. Howard Gordon created 24 for the Fox network. Vince Gilligan's going to go on to do Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. This is a room that is just an incubator for some of the biggest primetime shows we're going to see in the years to follow, shows that really revolutionize TV. And The X-Files itself is a super influential, revolutionary show for its time. It really is one that defines the 90s. It was my first time watching it. I'm super excited to see what everybody thinks. If you get a chance to watch it at home, we hope you do. It's really rad, and I think we should dive on into it.
Yeah, and if you want to watch the show before you listen to us, you can find it on Hulu. You can find every season of it on Hulu, I believe. So
Hulu, friend of the pod.
Absolute friend of the pod. Please, hopefully I can insert a subscribe using this link at some point in the future.
Hulu, give me your password. Hulu.
It's me again, guys. Thank you for shouting out Hulu and Fox. Now that we own them.
Mickey, give me your password.
Dana Scully's a Disney princess. Dana Scully's a Disney princess now.
So let's jump right in. Right. I think one of the things that first struck me about this is, like, even if you have not watched an episode of The X-Files, sort of like when we did Alf, you know about things about The X-Files, right? Like, the intro to The X-Files, the intro music to The X-Files is synonymous with this show. And this episode, we don't get it at all. We don't get
mad. I was so mad. I was
so upset at whomever just decided, no intro. You have $2 million. Why would you make an intro other than just a screen that says The X-Files, and then we get the quote, "The following story is inspired by actual documented accounts."
It was literally, it's literally one of the most iconic TV theme songs of all time. and you don't get it in the pilot, and I don't know what episode they start playing.
Yeah, shout out to composer Mark Snow for just absolutely bodying the score, even though we don't hear it. But man, you get some
Snow
really
dogs.
menacing tones and some cymbals doing some absolute work up top.
This was like back when it came to choosing music, because there was some time in like the 2000s where it changed to like actual, like using actual songs that were in popular culture as music behind the actors. This was back when you had a composer just killing it and like absolutely bringing a tone and a vibe to the show as a whole. And we get our first taste of that with this scene of seeing this girl running through the wood in all white. And she's approached by a blinding light and a figure very ominously there. We sort of flash forward maybe like a couple hours and we find out she's dead.
Oh, they killed
Not
her.
only, yeah, we can assume that possibly he killed her, but we get the quote, "It's happening again," like this extremely ominous moment in time.
I love it as this cold open, this intro. You're not really given any explanation. You're just thrust into the middle of a chase scene in the woods. I love that we don't see things right away. And I love that police investigation line of just class of 89. It's happening again. You want to know what that means so badly, and this show from its first minute just draws you in. There's no wasted time with setting anything up or over exposition. You're just thrust into the action, and I was hooked right away.
Yeah, it reminded me of one of my favorite horror movies, the intro to a little film called Thanksgiving, where a turkey is chasing a woman through the woods and murders her. And I like to think that was paying homage to this amazing scene.
I hope you're right, Rich, just for the idea. I would love if the director of that movie heard this podcast and was like, yep, they nailed it. It was X-Files all the way. From there, we immediately are brought to... The show doesn't really have, like, a home base. And what I mean by that is, yes, when I did my intro, I mentioned the J. Edgar Hoover building. That's really the closest we get to on this episode of we're going to be traveling to a different destination every week from the vibes that I'm getting from this pilot. And yes, we'll see the exterior of the FBI's headquarters, but otherwise we're going to be going places. And we're immediately introduced to one of our leads, and it is Dana Scully, played by Gillian Anderson. And she's sort of getting interviewed it almost seems like she is being interviewed to keep her job, almost. I don't know if any of you have experienced that of like, oh, hey, a consultant comes in and it almost gave me those Office Space vibes of like, what do you do here? And tell me about your background to make sure that you belong here still. But
yeah, absolutely.
it did such a good job of allowing the audience to not have Dana Scully be like, oh yeah, I went to medical school, I am in the FBI, but instead use these leaders within the FBI to give us that experience of like, we know everything about Dana Scully that we need to know without her saying much at all.
So there's definitely an element of her kind of interviewing for her job, but I also do get the sense that she is still kind of being commended for what she has done in that sense, because they are trusting her with someone with like an internal investigation essentially, because they're still like, Fox Mulder is on the books as a investigator for the paranormal, and they have a lot of questions about what's going on, what he's doing. We'll get into the fact that he has connections in Washington which allow him to keep getting funding, but I mean, they want her to go and be the internal auditor, which is a very, very cut and dry, seemingly boring job, I would assume.
Yeah, when you have the FBI investigating the FBI, that raised a lot of questions, but I do love this intro to Dana Scully. Gillian Anderson reminds me, it's okay.
Gilligan Anderson, is that what it was?
Sometimes names that start with a J or a G could be a little confusing in their pronunciation.
Son of a bitch. How dare you?
Yeah, Max, leave Geff alone.
Oh my.
But Dana does remind me a lot of Clarice, our hero from Silence of the Lambs, in her demeanor and things of sort. It's definitely clear to see the influence there. And something that I found really interesting that Chris Carter said in writing this was that he wanted to switch the power dynamic and how we view like men and women when it comes to the paranormal, and how in so many shows it's like the girl who's viewed as like the out there one, the believer, the conspiracy theorist, and there takes like the straight man to try and like steer the ship. And this show flips that narrative, and it's like you've got kind of like the crackpot guy and the straight shooter like girl, which God, in 1993 that was groundbreaking, and saying it out loud I want to like roll my eyes so far in the back of my head.
So what I will just say, if you're keeping it up at home as far as drinking games, whenever we mention the president of NBC, whenever we mention The Simpsons, whenever I mispronounce a word or a name, then please take a drink if I mispronounce anything in the future. As far as getting this idea of Mulder, though, speaking of the directors at the FBI doing such a good job, we get the idea of like almost, hey, we don't want him working on this stuff, but we can't get him to not because he's so highly distinguished as a human being, which is such an interesting concept to me of like, we have someone who's performing so well, but we want to get rid of him.
Yeah,
like,
they give Data Scully this great exposition line where they're like, what do you know about Fox Mulder? It's like, he's an Oxford-educated psychologist. He's their top analyst in the violent crime section. He's like the number one dude in this field. And then they ask her if they know what his nickname.
This is one of the lamest nicknames I've ever heard. They set him up to be such a badass. And what's his nickname, Max?
Spooky Mulder.
His name is literally Fox. It's so much better than Spooky.
I was gonna ask, like, one of the things I think does really interestingly is it like almost sets you up to imagine what he looks like, who this person is, without ever seeing him. Yes, this role is very famously played by David Duchovny. But like, did you guys imagine someone else almost playing this role, or like a different actor of the time? It was something that like I tried to allow myself to be suspended in like imagination of like, who would I love to see play this role of the time, or like current.
I'm shocked how young they both are, and I don't think I realized this given how long the show aired, but Anderson is 24 in this pilot, Duchovny's 32, and he's a babyface 32 at that. And so, yeah, I, from the description, expected someone a little more, I know what he looks like, obviously, but like I would expect someone sort of grizzled and tenured and like the kind of person who spent a lot of time down in the basement, and not this kind of like bright-eyed, baby-faced, charismatic character. Side note, what is lazier character naming? All the leads in Ballers just being executives at HBO, or Mulder being the name of the network that the show was on?
I did love that. I wonder if that was like a nod to the first person who would think about greenlighting the script. Jeff, to answer your question, I think, this might be a little too easy of an answer, but I immediately go to who plays like the grizzled, all-knowing scientist, or like kind of like the burnt out person at like an important agency. So I was thinking like Tommy Lee Jones in Men in Black. I was thinking Jeff Goldblum from Jurassic Park and stuff like that. That is who I assumed would be doing this kind of thing. But Mulder has a lot more energy, and David Duchovny.
Yeah, like what my mind sort of revolved around was the idea of like, okay, who am I picturing? Like, this guy is probably a kook. He doesn't have the charisma as a whole, but like I did think of like sort of an out there one of like, wouldn't it be interesting if you had this British guy like Colin Firth playing this kook in like. And yes, that is purely based off of them saying he went to Oxford. But like, and yes, I know you don't have to be British to go to Oxford. I know a few things, and that is one of them. But like,
that's what you learn at Oxford.
Yeah, but like the other one that sort of came to my mind was like, I would have loved seeing Philip Seymour play this role with that nerdy ass energy that he nailed at certain times. Yes, was he too young for this at the time? I believe he was. But, like, that's sort of someone that I just was like, I'm waiting to see Philip Seymour Hoffman sitting there, like, drinking, like, a big gulp and telling me about aliens.
Are you talking about that energy we see from him like 3 years later in like Twister and Boogie Nights and stuff?
Exactly. Like that sort of stuff is what I like would absolutely have fallen in love with. But like we do meet Fox Mulder. He is this like, when I think of a conspiracy theorist, I don't think of this quick wit person who is so goddamn charming. Like from the beginning. Yes, we see like all the photos of UFOs and stuff like that. Whomever the set designer was did just enough to make us feel like, oh yeah, he's in it. But like, he seems to be in it from a logical perspective as well.
And we get a great intro to him before we even see him. When Scully's first down there and you hear from the other side of a closed door of just, sorry, nobody down here, but the FBI's most unwanted.
I know I definitely wrote down a lot of cliche lines that he throws in, but it is very much police procedural language for like the next 20 minutes of the show.
Yeah, who else is on the FBI's most unwanted list? I'd like that list to be published all the time.
Probably me.
Oh, poor Rich. We want you.
You're not the FBI.
Yeah, oh, I'm so sorry, bud. So like from this point though, we get the sense of, hey, Mulder is fully aware of why Scully's there, right? Mulder knows he's being investigated. Mulder is going to make fun of Scully the entire time. That like, oh, you're writing your little notes and all this stuff. But we start to get a sense of him as a human being and like his fanaticism from a very quick scene in an airplane where some wild stuff starts happening. First of all, I was gasping at the amount of legroom they had on that airplane. It literally just shocked me. They were definitely not in business class. They were in coach, and none of their knees were touching the seat in front of them. And I want to go back.
Seats.
Oh my god!
He's got an entire row to himself. He is just absolutely horizontal.
Imagine the just like the sheer amount of farts that would just be in an American Airlines flight from Virginia to Oregon. Like, what? How on earth is everyone okay sitting on cloth bus seats?
It was one of those things where it's like, yes, the show was made 30 years ago, but I can still appreciate the 90s for what they were. But some wild stuff happens. The plane experiences terrifying turbulence to the point where luggage is flying. And meanwhile, we have an undisturbed Mulder laying down, watching everyone panic.
His headphones on, he's just chilling.
And he just says, "This must be the place." Which is just like, what a great line. I was like, oh, hot damn, you got me. Like, let's go.
I do think that this particular scene is extremely important in planting the seed of doubt in Scully's vision of Mulder, because, you know, as it stands right now, she thinks that he's like the crazy outlier of the FBI, and having this experience of the unexplained, the paranormal happening to him, you know, insane turbulence right over the Oregon border or something like that is truly like not necessarily a common thing, but like probably some of her most insane turbulence that she's experienced, judging by her reaction, and it not phasing him at all means that he's prepared for the craziness that's about to ensue.
We then are just navigated over to, we're in Oregon. We see the sign welcoming us to the town of Bellefleur, Oregon, the gateway to fun and recreation. And from there, we're immediately driving to the cemetery to exhume this body. And a
delightful little Mulder moment, though, talking about the FBI's previous investigations into this case they're breaking down. Mm-hmm. I just love how he talks about the FBI agents enjoying a little salmon with a lemon twist. I love the way he says it. I love that he's so unfazed by this world, but also that like he knows something that he's not ready to let Scully onto yet. Like he's playing his cards a little close to his chest as to not maybe freak her out. But there's just so many ways that David Duchovny says particular words. These pronunciations are delightful to me. It's that thing of, I can't imagine anyone else hitting and emphasizing words the way he does. That also like kind of maybe takes the edge off before we like really get up Schitt's Creek here.
Yeah, it's so interesting of like what he is holding back. Like he spray paints that X in the road when we start seeing the weird stuff happening to the radio and the car lights and watches and electronics as a whole. Doesn't say a word about it. Like you can tell his disdain for the organization that he's dedicated his life to as a whole. And then you also can tell like he knows the ways of working with people, like when they're going to exhume the body. And the previous doctor who reviewed the bodies comes and is trying to defend his work and like becoming the biggest red herring of all time and like giving all of our focus and attention. He just knows procedure. Like, I don't have to listen to you. I'm going to go ahead. I'm the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
That's right. That's why they put the I in FBI.
Already, though, we're still in this first act, and we're creating mystery. We're creating intrigue. We're showing, not telling. We're not getting so bogged down in details. There's so many points in this episode where I kept thinking to myself, in a modern sci-fi procedural FBI kind of show, where like this would have been the end point of episode 1. And this show doesn't get caught in trying to just be a multi-episode movie. It keeps its plot moving. It doesn't get bogged down in details. And it made me miss this kind of TV writing compared to where like stopping points would have been like in a 2022 type of show like this.
Yeah, like, and as we move forward, right, there's something up with the body. Like, let's just talk about it. That body looks weird. There's the great line of, oh, he obviously didn't try out for the basketball team, which just was like, so just like, one of the charming things of like, okay,
that's
cool.
So Law and Order.
It's so great.
And for all of our I Think You Should Leave fans, we get a coffin flop.
Yeah.
They're saying coffin flop's not a show. you guys, it's the president of Corncob TV.
I didn't rig shit.
It's definitely just like, but as we continue through the show, it does such a wonderful job of like showing the skeptic versus the believer of immediately Mulder is like, we gotta get DNA samples. We gotta do a full test of this body. We're the FBI. We deserve to be able to do all this stuff. And Scully's trying to have an explanation for everything. Use logic. Oh, it's an orangutan. It's obviously not a human being. Oh, you know, absolutely this foreign like object that she just has in her little glass, we'll talk about it, is definitely like man-made. I think it could have been X, Y, or Z, right? But I do love, like, one of the things that I instantly thought to myself of how this show might have aged poorly is, like, if that shit happened today, do you not think that the FBI would have been like, you know, we need, like, 5 or 6 more agents and maybe fly that over here?
Right.
Or, like, let me make a call on my cell phone really quickly.
Mulder cannot call absolutely anyone. It was like he knows he's under investigation. He's not going to get any resources. Something clearly had happened before where he needed that, and he's like, all right, I guess we're all on our own. Let's do this together. But, I mean, Scully has to be a believer almost like immediately once they start getting in that autopsy. We also, I don't know if we checked this point off as well, but you also get to see in this particular segment of the show the marks on the initial victim's back. Mm-hmm. So there's two small like mosquito bite looking marks on the back. It's an important connecting piece for all these different murders, deaths, disappearances, etc.
And they start tracking it based off of the marks, which is super interesting, right? Like, we go to I want to call it a hospital or an asylum to see 2 of the other people who had the marks. That doctor is breaking HIPAA. Just going to say that. Like,
it's 1993. We didn't have HIPAA.
I think we still had HIPAA. But he was just like, oh, yeah, I'm treating these 2 people for this. And jaw-dropping moment for me. But we meet Billy and Peggy. We find that they have the mark, right? And then we see Peggy have a psychotic breakdown. But like very soon after that, which was super interesting, is we see our first true moment of, I think, Scully really like diving in of fully believing into like it's I call these moments skeleton key moments based off of that movie of like, if you believe in it, then it's real. Of like, she fully believes she has these marks before she takes a shower. which I'm surprised that scene made network television. I'm just going to say that.
That's very saucy for 1993.
Super saucy. And like we see the marks and they're not the marks, the audience can tell, but you can see the paranoia is growing in Scully. And Mulder switches roles and becomes the voice of reason. Of, you don't have the marks. You're just, you're fine right now. But then we start to get a little bit more of an understanding of, like, this show, I do want to say, the show kills it. Like, the small little things this show does to help you believe in the conspiracies, to help you believe that some weird shit is going on when maybe it could be explainable, is just wild to me.
And you linger on them too. You don't get a lot of time to get caught up in those details. An example of this for me is when they wrap up at the hospital and Scully just asks, like, what were all these kids doing in the forest? And we don't get caught up in like hypotheticals about the forest. What do? We hard cut right to the forest. And now we are here. And shit starts going down, but like we don't waste any time. We don't linger on details. We just keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and it's your job as an audience to keep up and keep track.
Yep.
Yeah, and this show does do a good job of like terrifying you. Like there's not many shows I can think of that like try to scare you, especially in like the early 90s. Of like, we do see these lights. We do see this mysterious figure come from the lights, and we just find out it's the sheriff, and he's obviously hiding something that's happening there. But then after we get this false alarm, we get another instance of the lights. And, I joked about losing track of time. We lose 9 minutes.
Yeah.
We don't know what happened during that 9 minutes.
Yeah, we just see like a compass freak out and a little clock irregularity. And next thing you know, weird early 90s slow-mo cut, white flash, and then back to normal.
And we're back by that X as well.
Back by the X with the car dead.
Yeah. And yeah, during that, it is after that Mulder finds these marks and truly believes maybe something happened. Maybe I'm going to have a psychotic break. The fear is driving her to
Scully.
Scully. The fear is driving her to act chaotically and Mulder be this voice of reason as a whole. But during that moment, it allows for Scully to sort of take off this hardened self of acting as the third party and gets Mulder, I almost believe, because he sees Scully believe in that moment that these things are real, that he can finally say, this is why I'm so into this as a whole.
This is one of my favorite Mulder moments, actually, because he is jazzed about discovering that time loss and discovering that, like, there is something paranormal and unexplainable going on right now. And you can see him, like, physically get super excited. That it's just, like, he gets excited about the time loss. He gets excited about the possibility of alien abduction. And it's just like, yes, this is validating all my work. No one at the Bureau understands me. And you're going to see firsthand now the person who is coming to try to take my job and my funding away. You're going to see why I'm doing.
We get so many little facets to this character, and I think it makes the pilot so effective, and it draws you in as an audience because you get goofy, smart Alec, off-the-cuff Mulder early on in the Bureau and on the airplane and talking about like the salmon with the lemon twist. You get really passionate about his job Mulder with the time loss and breaking down like how this could be possible. And then you get really sincere, open book Mulder in the motel room conversation with Scully, where he starts to break down his family story and how he got into this work and what drives him as a person, which I think is such a beautiful scene between the two of them.
Yeah, it leads to, they get a phone call. It turns out that Peggy is dead. She was found dead just at the scene. They tried to revive her. Like, they do a very good job of showing, like, she just wasn't unexplainably dead like the first person. They tried to revive, tried to figure it out. But during this, all their evidence is gone. There's been a gigantic fire.
Yep.
When I say I can't believe the FBI didn't send more people, I was like angry at my TV.
Yeah.
Like literally like screaming like, how could you just have it in public facing knowing that people were upset that you were reinvestigating?
And I think we should mention that while they get that phone call that Peggy's body's been found, you just see a really quick glimpse of a hooded figure stalking the motel. There's no lingering on it. It's a very quick few second shot. And again, it drives that paranoia. It drives that fear. You know that people are onto them, but you don't know who it is. You don't know if this is local authorities, FBI, something outside, something paranormal. And they don't give you enough time to figure it out before it's like, boom, on to the next detail.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's when you get to see the county medical examiner's daughter at the scene of the fire, who, I mean, honestly, like, you know, between her and Billy, there's, I think, the most unexplained surrounding the two of them, over like why they're behaving as they do. And you know, we get Billy's dad, who's discovered like a couple scenes before this, warning the two agents to stay away from him. And you know, it's super strange as well. Like, you start getting those inclinations of like, okay, something is happening here. Yes, there's something paranormal happening, but there's also like human intervention or human protection, which I think is a very fascinating like combination, because if it was, I think real human nature is like, if it's paranormal, it's paranormal. If it's unexplained, it's unexplained. You don't also try to cover it up as a human. You want to try to figure out what it is.
It makes it so much more of a whodunit, right?
Yeah.
Because we can believe like, oh, it's paranormal, but you can't put a face to paranormal, right? Like, you can't put a face to an alien. They literally blurred out the alien's face in the first scene. I don't know if you saw that with the static.
Yeah, but the smoking man, quote
you
unquote.
can put a face towards evil. In this sense, we're almost led to believe that like Jay Nemen, the county coroner, and the medical examiner is this evil person who's doing this. Detective Miles is doing this out of evil and out of his own want.
And that makes this such an interesting first case for Dana Scully to be on too, because you have these paranormal elements, but you also have this local conspiracy cover up going, and it creates like, I don't know what to believe. I don't know what the truth is. It sort of drags her in different directions. It tests her as an agent and as a person. And it is so fascinating seeing these different levels to this conspiracy.
I have a hunch that this is what was added to the script in between the initial pitch and the final acceptance. Because if you just say, okay, we're battling the paranormal, we're battling in an invisible alien type situation, you can't really sell that to an audience unless it is someone's going to jail, someone's covering this up. You have to have like a physical, you have to, you know, let's see who the villain really is moment. And that is really like, that to me screams, I could see why it didn't work the first time, but I see why it works precisely now.
Yeah, it's sort of funny that you mentioned that, Rich. It's like, it is very much like adult Scooby-Doo, except we don't have a talking dog. And like,
yes. Wait until season 3.
No, oh my God. But like, one of the things after we see Teresa
guys,
go,
I heard an idea about a talking dog.
After we see Teresa get taken, right? And I'm going to keep her safe. We learn about why this has all happened. It was a graduation party sort of thing where they just have this need to go to the woods. They don't know what it is. We go back to the hospital. Scully uses reason in this instance to discover, hey, I think Billy's been doing it. I can prove it. And then we get this, it's such a good scene because it's shrouded in mystery, but like they're back in the woods and all this stuff happens, but we all watch it and we can't really explain what the fuck happened during that scene even. Like, what did you guys think about that final wood scene that we did get?
So I love that Scully ties the substance on Billy's feet to the substance she found in the woods, and knowing that this is how it's all connected and being able to prove that Billy's left the hospital. And I love all of the multi-vantage points happening simultaneously in this woods showdown. I love that we are hearing screams scattered throughout. We're seeing Scully get knocked down. We're seeing Mulder getting a gun drawn on him, and we're just cutting back and forth, and like, it's really drawing everything to its apex in a really exciting way.
Yeah, they really built this well. The one thing I didn't quite understand throughout all of this is why Billy's dad is so overly protective over this when he knows that the murders are pretty unexplained and he is in a catatonic state, and also why the medical examiner is so cool with everybody covering this up when it involves like potential harm for his daughter.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing. It leaves you wanting more, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that's such a great part of it is we are left from the scene, Billy coming out of his catatonic state after years, seeing that the dad is like overjoyed that his son is out of this state, even though he's got some splaining to do, right? Like he has got some splaining of how like he is at the center of this. And like Rich, to answer, at least my thought is, I think any parent is going to be protective of their child even if they can't explain it. Now, could he have been written a little bit better to seem like a caring human being rather than just a man with a shotgun? Sure.
Yeah,
I think he definitely could have. But like, we need this ominous presence that can be the face to our mystery as well.
True, very true. That still doesn't explain why the Naaman family or Jay like just being okay with his daughter being like essentially abducted into the woods on a seemingly regular basis.
100%.
Northwest Oregon.
But after this scene, we go back to the Edgar Hoover building, right? We are seeing Billy being questioned, being debriefed, and them debriefing Scully. And it's really interesting, right? You think, oh, wow, they have all the evidence in the world. But then Scully's superiors are like, you have a guy who was hypnotized saying what he thought happened. That's our evidence. Mm-hmm. And then Scully begins to, break the armor of the FBI and break the skepticism with that small little piece of metal she found saying, there is no substance that I can recognize this and match this to. Mm-hmm. And it was in the body that was taken from us. And that's sort of how the scene ends. As we see Scully leave, we get the smoking man walking into that room, and you can tell she thinks something is up. There's a cover-up about.
Yeah, you get the feeling that everybody wants to just believe what they want to believe. Everyone has their own intentions already, and they're going to protect their best interests. It's the same way that these leaders and officials in Oregon are protecting the interests of their small town. They don't want interference or meddling or news drawing eyes on this town. Yeah, they don't charge
Billy. Like, that was a big thing. There is no charges against him.
They want just to be dropped. They want this swept under. The FBI is going to believe what they want to believe. It doesn't matter how much Scully brings to the table. They're going to say, all your findings are unsubstantiated. Mm-hmm. But it is also such a crucial detail. And I love the way that they always refer to the nose device, because it just kind of pops up. Early on in the episode, after they've done all the coroner stuff, Mulder's asked Scully, check the x-ray. We don't see the x-rays being done. We don't see what it's on there. We see a little thing circled, and we don't know what it is. Even now, everything's been burned down in the motel. Dana Scully happens to have us in her pocket, and I love that we don't see her holding on to this. We don't see the x-rays being done. It's just this little tease of this object that we know is important.
Yeah, and that is this part in particular is just like the skeptic's dream. It's so much like they're covering it up, man. They know something that they shouldn't, and they don't want the public to know. It sets up the FBI as like a consistent, kind of antagonist towards what they're going to be doing. And, they're not rooting for Scully and Mulder's success. That is 100% not what's happening here. And you can see from them shelving that particular communication device in the files in the Pentagon that it's happened 4 times before.
This goes so much further beyond Fox Mulder too.
It has one of my favorite, definitely so far of the shows that we've covered, but one of my favorite cliffhangers of just okay, what's going to happen next? I know, Jeff, you've watched this show before. I don't know how episodic or serial this show is. Do they go back to Oregon at some point?
Yeah, they don't show us. I'm not sure if they go back to Oregon, right? I chose to just watch this pilot and add this. We'll talk about my thoughts about it as a whole, and maybe if I'll continue watching. But they just do such a good job of, I think, with a show like this, leaving untied explanations and not having it neat is so refreshing. Because you almost hope, I hope that we go back. I hope that we get an explanation. I'm hungry for an explanation. What are those other 4 ones? But what this TV show does so well, I think, as an ends, we get that phone call from Mulder to Scully saying, we need to talk. And that's sort of how we end this show. Is this is not the end of Mulder and Scully being together. This is not even the end of the case. There's a section of the Pentagon that might have all of this evidence included in it.
We love to see the bowels of a government building, don't we, folks?
That's right. They put those communication devices right next to James Madison's flute.
Yeah, it's wild. I don't think Lizzo is playing the little metal devices though. I'm so sorry.
No, it's in her nose currently.
Yeah. We do finish that episode. Was there anything that we didn't talk about? Things that you loved about this episode of television?
Yeah, we tease it very briefly, but I want to go back really quick to the Mulder and Scully motel conversation where Mulder kind of gets into being a little more open and personal and explaining his family's history. So Mulder reveals to Dana Scully, after assuring her that the marks on her back are just mosquito bites from the woods, that he actually has a personal connection to the paranormal, that he has a kid sister who, when he was 12 and she was 8, vanished without a trace in their home, and it completely destroyed his family. It sent him to go to school as far away as he could. And he later reveals how the government is blocking his research and how he himself went through repression memory therapy and how he can recall this bright light taking his sister while he was put into this waking coma that they refer to Billy being in the hospital scene. And how he can hear her cries, but he is stuck. He's paralyzed in his own body. And so we see these connections over time and how this case isn't even about the class of 89 in this town in Oregon. This goes so much beyond that. And it also it allows us to get another level and dimension to Fox Mulder, where we don't just see the goofy side of him. We allow him to be personal and emotional and letting this sort of rookie under his wing and getting to know him. I love the way they set this character up. I think he's a beautifully written pilot character, and I love that scene.
Yeah. I truly love that as well. I don't know if you guys caught this as well in the IMDb, that and I don't know if he's actually shown in this show, but that particular doctor that Mulder is referring to is in the credit for this episode, and I don't recall seeing him in any part of it. Is there a flashback or something like that I might have missed?
Which doctor?
It was like Heinz Zabler or something like that.
No, I don't remember seeing him either. So maybe
is that the doctor they walk with at the asylum?
No, there's no way. No, because he brings up that the hypnosis from that particular doctor that he's talking about.
Who knows?
Another mystery.
Yeah, another mystery for
the unexplained. We
now have an unexplained mystery as well.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. It's Dr. Heitz Werber. That's the name of the doctor who is doing that deep hypnosis.
Interesting. Rich, any things that you loved about this show that we didn't end up talking about?
I just loved how much setup there is. Like, I know, obviously, like, I got super into the very generic police procedural lingo of just like two overly confident people clashing, and the just the dialogue that becomes like, so I don't know, it's so played out, it's so like da 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 da. It's like, it's, you can almost like write it yourself. But I am, I think really like what we had set up with so many different parts of the show. There's so many different elements that I'm like, I need to know more. I think they did a tremendous job doing that.
Yeah.
What do you think, Jeff?
I think this was great. I think we talked about a lot of the things that were on my mind. Like, this show somehow in the first episode gave us so much chemistry and buy-in to the relationship that Scully and Mulder had, that it felt like these two actors had been working together for years and were just working off of each other. So like, congrats. Like, obviously we're talking about two heavyweight actors, right? But like, I'm just
now
genuinely
we are
impressed.
now, but they weren't in 1993. Anderson was a young theater performer from New York who had really no on-set experience. There's stories, if you read into like oral histories of the X-Files, where she didn't know what the director meant by stand on your mark. And now she's one of the most acclaimed TV actresses of a generation. Duchovny had done a little bit of work with like Twin Peaks, but was mostly known as like a host. And so it's just wild how comfortable these two are despite their relative inexperience in this pilot. Like, two unknowns became so iconic so quickly. It feels like they've been working together for a lifetime.
Yeah.
Before we even got into this one, I had no idea that Gillian Anderson was Scully. Like, because I watched so many things that she's in now. I love Sex Education. I loved her in The Crown. And obviously, like, her movie career is taking off significantly. Like, it is, I mean, she's one of my favorite actresses right now. I had no idea that this is how she got her name.
I can very, very, very optimistically say that this will not be the last time we talk about either of these two. Before we get into our in-flight question, any wait a minute moments that you found in this episode?
Hey, yeah, I got one.
Yeah, what you got, Max?
Hey, you guys know that nurse who's breaking all the HIPAA violations?
Oh my God, yes.
Sure do.
So the second time they go back to the hospital and they're asking if she is aware that Peggy left or knew when Peggy left, and she refers to it as that ward not being her side of the vegetable aisle, or not being her side of the produce aisle.
The language they used for these patients was horrifying.
Ooh, man, that was one of the most ableist things I've ever heard, and just a wildly early 90s joke. That was like it's like they hired the writing team for Beavis and Butthead for just one sentence.
Yeah,
that is what I expect from a Fox show.
Showing its signs.
I did have one very interesting thing when I was like going through some of the cast, and you'll never guess who you'll never guess who in this particular episode has a connection to some of all of our favorite artists of all time. The guy that plays Dr. J. Naiman is the lead singer of a band called Clear Light, which in the 60s and 70s were incredibly popular before he left to go do Broadway. He opened for The Doors, Jimi Hendrix, and Janis Joplin. That is one guy who just had a minor cameo in the X-Files premiere.
That's amazing.
I know, I love it. That's amazing. Just a little fun fact. I guess that's not really that way. Hold the phone.
Shout out to Cliff DeYoung.
Yeah. So let's get to our in-flight questions. If you have an in-flight question, you can give us a call, or you can also shoot us a DM. We normally post a little bit about the episodes we're going to do a little bit ahead of in advance. We'll make sure to share those socials. But we have a voicemail today from one of our someone who's taking flight with us.
Hey there, Pilot's License crew. This is Alex calling in. I have a question for you about the latest X-Files episode. What do you guys think happened during that alleged 9-minute time jump? Let me know your thoughts. Thanks.
Oh, Jeff, I think the call's coming from inside the house.
Oh, it might be. It might be actually coming from Washington, D.C. So there are two ways we could answer this. We could answer it very seriously, or we could answer it like the three of us would normally answer a question like this. I will let each of
idiots.
Yeah, I will let each of you choose how you'd like to answer it.
Nothing happened. It was a November raid by Guns N' Roses one time and continued with their drive. Now drop it.
I was just gonna say, they both watched Too Many Cooks and they never got that time back.
And Alex, I will say to your question, in a serious tone, maybe they did get taken by some paranormal figures. But I like to think that all of us have experienced losing 9 minutes or more in our lifetime.
Yeah, you listen to this podcast.
And there might have been a scene that was taken out of what Fox and Mulder and Scully were doing prior to this. That explains everything for us. So from there, we did get another question. Yeah. And speaking about Fox and Mulder, Scully and Mulder, we got a question about them almost becoming icons, like sex icons in the 90s. And I'd love to hear, our audience would love to hear our thoughts about those two and their statuses.
Are we ranking that? Are we doing a hot or not quiz for the top cast of X-Files?
Transport yourself back to 1993.
Because Gillian Anderson still would now. David Duchovny would then, probably still would now.
All right, so for the next 5 minutes, all three of us are editors and writers for Tiger Beat magazine.
Oh my god.
I mean, Duchovny has this like early 90s alt slacker hotness about him, this sort of just like too cool for school attitude that
like a John
definitely
Cusack
define.
thing.
Yeah, like it feels like, I don't know, Gen X hotness, plus like he's got a job.
He has a very high profile job.
Yeah, I would say that from my perspective, I get it. That's all. I absolutely I get it.
This is maybe the most uncomfortable the three of us have ever been on this podcast.
No. We've been more uncomfortable before. You have to listen to all of our episodes to get when I'm talking about.
Find out when.
The game of the week is when were we the most uncomfortable.
Yeah. No, but like in all honesty, I absolutely understand it. And maybe it's just because of the like I was talking about, the chemistry that the two of them had with each other. But this show, immediately you are rooting. Like, I was just like, I don't want to say, okay, every man and every woman who are friends have to have a sexual relationship in order for them to remain friends, because there are some people who think like that, and I'm not one of them. But like, immediately I'm like, oh yeah, there is undeniable chemistry between the two of them that will bloom, that I want to just watch that. Yeah. And like, it's just me being me, but like at the same time, I think that the charm of David Duchovny is just like undeniable, right? And like Gillian Anderson, I said it right this time, is like,
proud of you, bud.
I'm so proud of me too.
That's growth. That's growth right there.
I get an extra scoop of ice cream
that's
tonight.
Growth.
As far as like her in this role, yes, it's just like Rich, you said, then and now, like undeniable. And like, yeah, so I hope that's your answer to your question. You made us all slightly uncomfortable, but you got all of our answers. Rich, we got our questions from our in-flight questions done. But I know that you normally have Rich's quiz of the week.
Yeah, I sure do. And, I really thought about the legacy of the show and how much it has inspired art for, the coming decades and everything. And I want to give you guys a little, to borrow a game from Jimmy Fallon. And I wanted you guys to fill in the blank on this one if you think you can remember. One of my favorite X-Files inspired pieces of art is a little song called 1 Week by the Bare Naked Ladies. And I want you guys, and if you remember, there is a, sit back and listen to the song, but there is a verse that goes, chickadee China, the Chinese chicken, have a drumstick, and your brain stops ticking. Watch an X-Files with no lights on. We're Don LeMaison. And then I want you guys to give me the following line for this. The three options are, and the time jump is getting on. I hope the smoking man is in this one. And I hope I see some aliens.
B. I hope the smoking man's in this one.
It's B.
You're correct. I hope the smoking man is in this one. Like Harrison Ford, I'm getting frantic. Like Sting, I'm tantric. Like Snickers, I'm guaranteed to satisfy. Like Kurosawa, I make bad films. I don't make films, but if they did, they'd have a samurai. Anyways.
Rich's game of the week, everybody.
That's as much as I can do before we get sued.
Yeah, Bare Naked Ladies, your check will be in the mail for our AdSense.
Don't promise that. Don't promise that.
Yeah, they're going to want $1 million.
The joke's on them. There is no AdSense.
Well done.
Thank you for that awesome piece of trivia, Rich. But from there, let's talk about the lasting legacy of this show.
Oh boy, it is there.
There is 11 seasons. Keep in mind non-consecutive, because there were 2 additional seasons, one that happened in 2016, one that happened in 2018. 218 total episodes of this show. That is an insane amount of television. Most of the shows were like 45 minutes each. The show won 34 different awards. nominated 151 different times,
wow,
including writing Emmys, Gillian Anderson winning lead actress, Best Drama Golden Globe, sweeping lead actor and actress for Golden Globes in 1996. I talked about the revival. There were also movies that were associated with it.
There were 2 movies and 2 spin-off series. This thing is a juggernaut.
Well, that goes back to my original point of, like, because they made this the unexplained, quote unquote, instead of it has to be about UFO cases, it has to be about XYZ. They left the door open for literally anything that could possibly be unexplained. It is UFOs, it is Bigfoot, it is conspiracy theories, it's everything.
So I want to talk about something wild, talking about something that is explainable. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the ratings of this show, and I just want to put this in perspective. So the highest rated season was season 5, which debuted. The first episode had 27.34 million people watching the show. And that season had an average, this was the highest average, of 19.8 million viewers per episode. Now, for reference, Sunday Night Football in 2021 to 2022 only averaged 18.1 million viewers per game.
That is like, in one episode of the X-Files, more people watch that in every game of the Stanley Cup combined. Is like, that's completely insane.
So one little other thing. One of the worst rated or worst viewed seasons still had 9.1 million average viewers.
Oh my God.
And that was more recently. If you were comparing the ratings of that season to the current television viewership, it would rank 14th on the list. And that's like by like 0.1 million. It's not in the top 10. This show is the reason why a lot of network television folks who are in those executive positions are unhappy with how their shows are doing. Because they literally see these numbers and can't explain how they have to compete with football.
You can't explain. You can't explain
the unexplained. I do want to give a little bit of context here because based on Vince Gilligan's connection with the show, I did want to go back and give a little bit of context compared to his far more popular or more critically renowned show, Breaking Bad. The finale of Breaking Bad, which is the highest rated episode, of the entire show, only 10.3 million people watched. 10.3. That wouldn't have even broken through in any. That would have been the lowest rated or lowest watched TV show or episode of that entire season.
And I went into the numbers on this one too. And season 1, which aired at 9 p.m. on Friday nights, what is a death slot essentially, averaged 11.2 million an episode at 9 o'clock on a Friday in 1993. Whoa. The pilot got a 12.
Oh my God.
It's insane how many people made this appointment TV. They shifted it from Friday to Sunday, and that's when it starts getting upwards of 20 plus for certain episodes. But to think about the cultural phenomenon that was this show, you had to tune in week to week, and shows like this are why I think I'll always defend the weekly release model for shows, because you have to be able to gather and talk about this. 100%. This show builds momentum by being water cooler fodder on Mondays, by it was one of the earliest shows to have message boards in the early days of the internet to discuss fan theories and things of that sort. You don't get that when you drop an entire season at the same time. You get that when you organically build interest and create something for people to talk about week in and week out.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask, question I ask to end us every week. Would you continue watching this show, and could it be made today?
I mean, I'll jump in. Yes and yes. The show is technically kind of being made today still. They are still making X-Files spinoffs, right? Is that right? But God, I want to watch the second episode of this so badly. If I had another 49 minutes to devote to episode 2 just to see where this goes, to see if any questions are answered from episode 1, I'm 100% in.
Yes, I think that this show could be made today. I think this is a top tier pilot episode in terms of the actual writing behind it. I'm all in on these characters. I would 100% keep watching. I don't know if I have time for 217 more of them.
Yeah, you do.
But I'm definitely very intrigued. I love this.
Flash of light. Oh, where did these 11 years go?
I absolutely think this show could be remade. I think that this show, there have been great, very successful seasons of this show being remade with some gigantic actors associated with it. I could see them remaking this pilot, in all honesty. I am very surprised that we have not heard that they are going to remake shot for shot this pilot with a few minor additions, because there's an entire generation of folks that would this up.
Yeah.
With that being said, I plan on watching more of this show. I got an entire Friday evening where I'm going to pop in, some popcorn and let my inner conspiracy theorist shine, watching this show and being right there with Mulder. So that's 3 yeses, y'all. We get the signal to land this plane, and as we come to a close, I'd love to hear where everyone can find y'all.
This is a much less turbulent flight than Mulder and Scully's into Oregon. Before I shout things out, I just want to say, we are mere days from Halloween. And folks, if you're doing a pop culture or a TV-centric costume, we want to see it. So please, if you're doing anything for Halloween that is TV themed, please tag us in Facebook posts, personally, tag us in tweets or Instagrams at TV Pilots License. You can shoot us an email at tvpilotslicense@gmail.com. We want to see all your costumes. Maybe we'll do a contest. I don't know. We'll figure something out.
And feel free to DM Max literally anything. Any image you want, any conspiracy theories, thoughts, anything like that. Max's DMs are wide open.
But you can find those DMs on Twitter and Instagram at MaxwellSig.
You can find me on Instagram at Damn That's Rich, and please make sure if you are a fan of the podcast to rate and review on both Spotify and Apple if you can. Every review helps us boost it up to some more people who are interested in learning about TV episodes or just TV or just talking TV in general.
Yeah, and as far as that, make sure to also find us on YouTube.
Yes.
Where you can see our faces, as majestic and beautiful they are. You can find me, though, at RunJeffRun on Instagram and Twitter. As we said, you can find us on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram at TV Pilots License. If you have questions for the show, if you have questions about our next episode, email them to tvpilotslicense@gmail.com or give us a call at 213-290-1713. Make sure to watch our Instagram for hints about our next episodes, as we are always giving some sneak previews. And with the plane landed and the seatbelt sign off, we look forward to flying the bright skies of the TV world with you. And stay safe, stay great, and we hope to see you soon.